Welcome to our 3-minute Gestalt series. This is unit number 17 on managing a unit of work. Now, Gestalt is definitely not a paint by numbers type of modality. Gestalt is organic. It's about biological liveliness. It's about being in tune with your flow and in the rhythm of flow of self and environment and contact. So in Gestalt, we don't like to define what we do according to a set of techniques. Yes, there are Gestalt techniques such as exaggeration or embodiment or playing things out or using two chairs. But Gestalt is really not about those. Gestalt is more fundamentally a kind of almost a philosophical approach, and it's based on relationship and these other factors that I've been discussing. And at the same time, we can, you could say, understand the structure of a Gestalt session in relation to a wave. So we use the wave model as the wave of awareness, and we can also use that same model in a simple form in terms of what we do in what we call a unit of work. That is a session, a therapeutic session. It might be individual, it might be a group, it might be a couple, generally within a specific space of time. That's how things tend to work. There are some people that do more open-ended type of therapy. They might do a half-a-day therapy or even a whole day with a client, and then it's something different. Then you have a whole lot of smaller cycles going on. But normally we've got 45, 50 minutes or an hour and a half, specifically amount of allotted time. So what's important is that we manage the process within that. Now, Gestalt has this Taoist Wu-Wei concept that where it's action and non-action. We're not just pushing, but we're not just passive either. So there's something we weave in between there. And that Wu-Wei approach, or we could say in English, the creative void, it underpins Gestalt. You know, in Gestalt, I don't start with, well, this is the goal of the session, even if the client brings up a particular topic that they want to deal with. I'm still not going to make some linear beeline for how do we achieve that goal, have we achieved it. Gestalt is paying attention to figures. That's very important, and we follow that figure and we follow where it leads and we follow it deeper. That's the general idea. Now, in the Gestalt cycle, there's a movement of energy, awareness, energy, and then contact and resolution. Now, we can use that metaphor, if you like, with the way that we manage a session. So at the beginning of a session, we're looking around, what we call it the what is, and this model comes from Cleveland. So the first stage, the what is, what's going on, what's up, what's important. Yes, the client might have something they have in mind. I'm also interested in what else is going on, what I observe about them, my reaction to them, my knowledge of them. So all these are the ingredients that haven't yet coalesced. In a way, they're a little bit like the beginning of the awareness cycle where we just have sensations and they haven't formed into a figure. So at some point in the session, we need to clarify what is it, what is it that we're focusing on? What is it that we're talking about? What's most important? And that comes out of the interaction between client and therapist. I say that the figure's co-created. So it's got to do with what's got energy and interest for the client and also what has energy and interest for the therapist. So the next phase is focusing on a specific figure. It seems like what's really important is the way that you deal with time and the way that that becomes a problem in relationship and the way that time was a factor when you were growing up. There were no boundaries and it was hard to get a sense of when things began or end. Okay, so we've got a clear figure. So the identification of that figure is the second phase. And then the third phase is the energy, the action, the contact, the intervention, which is, you know, the bulk of the therapy. So we need to not leave that too late. One of the mistakes people make, especially getting too embroiled in people's storytelling, is that people can generate many figures, and they're all very interesting. They're all very relevant. They have a lot of energy, but there's too many. We can really only pick one, and we can only work with one in a Gestalt session. So we just want to keep going until we become clear on the figure. So I don't want endless storytelling. I don't want 10 different, important issues that the person has. Initially, I'm going to listen to them, but then we've got to focus on one of them. And that needs to be done not 3/4 of the way through the session or 80% of the way through the session. It needs to be done sort of about, 1/3 of the way, 1/4 of the way through the session, so that we can then take the next step, which is doing it, which is the intervention. And generally in Gestalt, this reflects some kind of experiment. We're moving from talking about things, which is useful for gathering understanding, information, but the actual intervention, the actual therapeutic work itself is the interaction, is the embodiment, is stepping into experience, which is very core in Gestalt. So that takes up the third area of the unit of work. In whatever time we've got allocated, whether it's 20 minutes or 40 minutes, we're going to manage this sort of graph, if you like. The analogy is like a plane taxiing, taking off, coming to the right altitude, and then coming down. So once we've worked with the issue, we've addressed we've explored it with the person, then we're going to bring the plane down. And that doesn't just want to be a bumpy landing. So the fourth phase is the completion, and that involves some usually level of kind of reflection or softening the energy, preparing the person for the end. It's good to let people know that the end's coming. It's good ourselves to realize that it's essential to realize that we need to wind things down, because sometimes people will bring up a new figure, something very important or very pressing right at the end of the session, something else emerges, and then I need to say, well, that's very interesting. That sounds really important. I'd love to talk about that. And today we're winding down, don't have time to address it. Let's put it on the agenda for next time, and I make a note of it. Otherwise, it can get very messy because you open a new box and there's a lot of intense feelings and we don't have time to process them. We don't have time to take the plane off and land it again. So it's very important in that last phase, the therapist is responsible for all these phases, for managing them carefully, so that there's a nice sense of a wave there. It's a graceful kind of process. And that is the managing of the unit of work that we do in Gestalt. You could say not just in Gestalt. I mean, I think most therapies need to manage the time, but in Gestalt, because of the way that we work, this is how we describe it. And if you, as therapists, really are cognizant of managing the session in this way, then you can fit a meaningful and satisfying piece of work into any frame of time, even 10 minutes. So it's a very useful model. It doesn't prescribe how we work, and it's good not to be too focused about the structure of it, but this is the basic feel of it. This is the form of it.